Firstly, thanks to Select and Exister for inviting us to talk today. Before I start, and I hate it when I'm in the audience and people do this, but how many people use R here? Okay, wrong presentation. So you lot, no questions at the end, others free to ask questions. One of the things that amazes us at Mango is, since we founded in 2002, is the growth of R. And we started the company in 2002, and these are all of our customers down the right-hand side. And just checking, and Lloyd's isn't on there, so I've done a really professional job and thought about that one before I came. We work with a lot of major companies deploying stats and statistical analysis to a wide range of user groups. This is a slide that we show to the Americans, and we get away with it. So we're based in Bath. We are based in Bath, Chippenham, actually. Chippenham is a much more romantic place. If you're looking for a weekend away, I can highly, highly recommend it. It's gorgeous. The pictures of Chippenham don't quite have the same effect. So we are based globally, as our customers are global. And we're seeing a lot of growth in our usage, particularly in our Shanghai office. And I'll come on to that a little later. So why do we start Mango? Here's a question for you. There was one statistician and one idiot. Guess which one you've got today. So apologies, no statistical questions, please. Richard and I met when we were selling S+ to pharmaceutical companies. And I've spoken to a few people this morning with experience of those sorts of areas. And it wasn't the easiest sale in the world, to be honest. When I'm the head of SaaS at GSK, I've paid round about, don't quote me on this, £1 million a year for my license. It's a site license. Everyone can use it. Why wouldn't you use anything else? I've also got in the region of 500 SaaS programmers dotted around the world, all used to using SaaS. This is how we did it in the past. This is how we're going to do it in the future. And Richard and I, and Richard, bless him, is quite enthusiastic, would sit in front of these people and convince them, or try to, that 100-line program you're running in SaaS that takes ages to run, much, much better in S+. 10 lines, 8 lines, 7 lines. And Richard would go into a fury to try and shorten that script to a point where you were convinced and you were going to buy it. But of course, buying another piece of software when you're a big company is not the easiest thing in the world. And Marcus alluded to it earlier. Trying to get something like R in, I want to use a brand new piece of software. Can I have a few £1,000s, please? And all of you commercial people will know that's dead easy. The IT teams are desperate to spend money on brand new pieces of software. Why are these people unhappy about spending money on new software? It's because you don't use the stuff you've got properly. And this is the key issue for IT teams. I spent all this money last year on this graphics package, and you've barely touched it. So there's no way I'm going to implement something else. So Mango's capabilities, sorry, it's a really messy slide this, but in essence what we realized when we set Mango up was it wasn't so much about selling software, it's not so much about getting religious about what software you're going to use. It's about the end results. It's about who needs to run this analysis. And what we do is we use R particularly a lot, and all these technologies on the second column, to deliver analysis. And analysis has changed since 2002, and this is when I sound really old, because we started Mango in 2002, and in those days we used to speak to statisticians. God loved the statisticians, and we would get the statistician really excited about S+. And we'd do a good job of that. But the statistician has got this huge pile of reports to run for the users who don't really care how it's run, they don't care what it's run. Their boss told them, you must have this report done, and it must be sent to me. And in those days, certainly in pharmaceutical and finance, there was a massive reliance on the big behemoth type pieces of software. SAS, SPSS, S Plus I put on just for old time's sake, but it's not really true. And what you'd have is people sat, and their sole job, and there's some of you in the audience today, so apologies, but your sole job is to run reports for other people. It's not your analysis. You're just in charge of running these things. We'd also have a data warehouse, and my background before Mango and Insightful was with mainstream business intelligence tools. And boy, did we love a data warehouse, because you can get all of your data in one place. And it's perfect. All I need to do is get something to help me access that data. And I go backwards and forwards, and I run my reports really nicely. We thought we were really the bee's knees in those days. Analysis today. And we heard earlier from Paul that we've got massive amounts of unstructured data. And we've built these data warehouses, and now we talk to people and find that actually we've got our data warehouse over here, and we've got another data warehouse over there, and we've got SAP over there, and we've got this Twitter feed. And I was at the conference the other week, and I am going to analyze my Twitter feed. There may only be 50 tweets. Look at me, down with the kids. There's only 50 tweets to analyze, but what the hell? I'm going to do it because I can. And that's the issue. My 7-year-old son wants to put a DVD on, plugs it all in, buttons pressed. The other day I was around a friend's house, their 3-year-old knows exactly the buttons to press to get, Barbie and the Prince on the telly. 3 years old. Now, when I was 3 years old, oh no, you don't want to hear any more about when I was 3 years old. But it's all adding up to an environment that is very, very difficult for mainstream big software companies to cope with, because I want my data now. And I always typify this as, I am the idiot, but I'm not a complete idiot. I also happen to be the boss. So Amy, poor old Amy sat over there, frequently gets a call from me, I want this. When do you want it? Now? 2 minutes? Something like that? And actually, wouldn't it be better if I can run my analysis when I want to? And that's the arena that we're now working in. We're seeing statistical departments at big pharmaceutical companies slashed to pieces. We don't need the statisticians, we don't need the programmers, we'll outsource all this, but you still need the analysis done. And how are we going to do this? Well, essentially, we're going to do this by getting cleverer with the technology available to us. So, apologies to the R users. For the non-R users, why do people use R? They use R because it's free, because it's open, it's extensible. I can connect it in any way I want. When I'm the head of GSK IT, who told us never is R going to be used within GSK in about 2004, when they are talking about using R these days, you've kind of won the battle a little bit. You can connect it however you want. You can, if I want to at GSK, I can walk around Stockley Park and put it on every desktop. And I can give them multiple versions. It's always great fun when you come and see a Mango presentation. If it's by one of the statisticians, just ask them how many versions of R are on your laptop. I assure you it's getting on for double figures most of the time. So it's very, very fast development. The global community of users, this is just a nonsense. So there was a nice piece in the Wall Street Journal some years ago. They put the numbers at 250,000, not quite that big yet. One of our erstwhile competitors, Revolution, talk about there being 2 million users today. Well, what's a user? I don't know. When you go and download R, nothing's tracked particularly. It's getting a little bit cleverer. But one of the other things, and I apologize, there should be a graph on here, but you've seen in Marcus's presentation the power of R's graphing. So you've got complete control over the graphing outputs. And these days, especially with things like Shiny, you've got a multitude of deployment mechanisms. So what's the history of R? It's like the new kid on the block. In the last 5 years, all of a sudden, we don't have to tell you what R is anymore. Certainly in 2002, we would sit there and we would be giving you options around, do you want to do this in S+, SAS, or R? And most people in 2002, in a commercial environment, absolutely wet themselves at the thought of using unsupported, non-commercial software, especially developed by a bunch of guys that they'd never met. Not going to happen. So the history of R actually goes way back, and S, which is the basis, was developed in the 70s at Bell Labs, people who develop Unix and things like that. So award-winning program development. This picture here is one of the early sort of plans, as it were. Then, more dodgy times for S. Poor old S got sold by Bell Labs to, wasn't Insightful, but it became Insightful, who created a commercial version of S. And when your researchers at Bell Labs found out that they weren't allowed to develop what they wanted to develop, they were being told to develop what Insightful wanted them to develop, it didn't go so well. So in the late sort of 90s, two guys, and you'll notice they've both got names starting with R, they started this offshoot. And Richard and I were still employed at the time by Insightful. And I think it's fair to say Insightful, who now have been bought by Tibco and S+, does still just about live on. But Insightful didn't really know what to do. How do you compete with something that's free, that's open, and that's been developed by the people who, up to last week, were developing your software? Big, big problems. So R today, now, no, we showed this slide yesterday at a presentation and got 1,000 questions about TIOBE, TOBE indexes. This is an index of popularity, and it's got several measures attached to it. So it's not just downloads, it's mentions, it's references, things like that. And you can see that, my word, Jim Goodnight at SAS is absolutely struggling. Wake at night, fearing what's going on with R. C and Java, and this is a list of mainstream programming languages, so the fact there's some stats tools on there is even better. But R has really, really leaped in popularity. So what are people using R for today? And apologies, because this has been touched on somewhat. So who's a good driver? And I've got some bad news for drivers like me. We're all going to have black boxes in our car in the future, and they're going to know just how fast I drive down to Exeter. And they're going to charge me my insurance premium based on that fact. They're going to pick up the fact that one of my colleagues picked up 3 points on his license yesterday, and they're going to charge him not just an amount for those 3 points, but they're actually going to put this into a statistical environment and work out how dangerous a driver he is. What bonus should I pay? This is a major confidential piece of work that we did in the past, and senior partners of a senior firm, their payment at the end of the year was based around R and R rules engines. The one I love is on the right-hand side. That's a basketball court. So in the US, who are a little bit more advanced in sports stats than we are in this country, they are analysing the efforts and pulling this all together. This is all done, I think, by ESPN. So this is actually stuff that comes out to the consumer on the television as well. Will someone like this nondescript can of drink? We work with a company who are launching one of their best-known drinks in China. And the Chinese do not like sugar. When you go to China, don't bother with the puddings. They're disgusting. They really are. So the Chinese do not like the sickliness, the sweetness that we're used to. So I'm not allowed to tell you which it is, but when you go there and you buy a can of this drink in the future, you're going to get a very nasty surprise because it's not going to taste the same. So they're moderating this, doing their sensory analysis. This picture isn't an army or whatever it looks like. That's a pipeline. So I've got these pipelines going across deserts, across wilderness. I need to make sure that it's working. I need to make sure that the maintenance is kept up to date. And so what I need to do is use analysis to work out which parts of this pipeline, is it this corner or that corner that I need to go and inspect next. And when you've got thousands and thousands of miles of this, you really need to get that right. If there's a leak in your pipe, it's pretty bad news, as BP found. In the bottom corner, this is for the youngsters in the audience, but you play a game online, guess what? They know this. They know when you play, they know who you play with, and you'll notice little suggestions popping up all the time. Why don't you play this game? You like that one. And the great thing is that those suggestions are going to be really good. You're going to want to play those games. Not like the good old days when Club Card used to send me nappy vouchers. So why has R grown quite so fast? We've got massive amounts of deployment mechanisms. We can now put that behind Shiny. We can deploy it via web apps. We can deploy it on every desktop. But the key, I think, is the new statistical techniques. Most academics, and again, that's not a statistical concept, the word most there. Most academics I come across are teaching students these days around stats. So students are coming out, they're doing their work in R, they come out to industry, they want to use R. And the IT team says, yeah, I don't want you to use R, but you know what? I'm struggling these days because of Marcus's example. I'm struggling to come up with a reason. IT still don't like R. They still don't like these open source, weirdy-beardy systems. So it's still a battle, and it's a battle we get very, very involved with. I put cheap on the bottom because it would be slightly wrong of me to say it's free, knock yourself out. There are always costs of doing this. And if you're going to replace things like SAS with R, then you need to think about these things very, very carefully. It needs to be considered, and it needs to be done in a way that keeps the users really occupied and really happy. Unhappy users don't use systems. So this is I Am Legend. This is the last statistician alive. And there's some real issues around R and how it's being used. When you deploy R, that's great. Really good. I'm really keen. Come and do a training course at Mango. We'll get you going properly. But you're out there. You're on your own. And what's the first thing you do? You Google stats R. And you find something. I've never been to Monte Carlo, but sounds like a great place. So the first thing I'm going to do is Google Monte Carlo analysis in R. What do you know? There's a package for it. Great news. And I, the idiot at Mango, am going to start running Monte Carlo analysis on some data that may or may not keep the lights going in this room. How we support that usage, how we actually engage with these people, and how we define what the right analysis is, and how we give people access to them is very difficult. And Marcus touched on it very much earlier, about trust. How do I trust your analysis? I want that report, I want to see your analysis, and I want it now, and I want to send that to my boss. He sends it to his boss. And at some point that goes wrong, and I get a phone call. You need to come and see the boss's boss's boss. And I'm there being told off because that analysis wasn't right. So the deployment mechanisms are there, the cheapness is there, the freedom's there, but freedom brings problems as well. So what's the future of R? Marcus, he's a cool guy, yeah? He's been using R for quite a long time. 10 years. Wow. Nearly as long as me. So Marcus goes back to what, 1.7? Something like that? Yeah, long time ago. And you know what? Marcus is getting bored. He doesn't know it. He's found Google Viz, he's found Google Motion Charts. They keep him a little bit occupied. But you know what? Chain Ladder hasn't had a new release for a year, a whole year. He's bored of it. Oh, you ruined my story. So, people like Marcus may well, the key developers of R, Ross and Robert, they got bored once before. What's to stop them getting bored again? And when things become mainstream, then very often the cool kids go and play somewhere else. The other thing with R is it's very unwieldy. It's becoming a bit of a nightmare. What package should I use to do X, Y, and Z is not an easy thing to answer. And a lot of our work is involved in helping these people work out whether you can trust that package from the University of Lima. It's really, really important. There's some dreadful stuff out there. There's some dreadful stuff written, dreadful stuff released. There's some brilliant stuff as well. The other thing is, and this always makes me smile, is people like SAS, SPSS, Oracle, Teradata, they've all mysteriously developed connectors to R all of a sudden. And I'm cynical enough to think that that's a rather scared response to tell you that you can still use R. Just do it through my interface. Keep paying me that money. You don't need anything but what I've got. And there's this thing called Julia. Is anyone using Julia? No. So Julia is the new R, apparently. So why are people, I'm not a statistician, so why are people using Julia? I don't know. But I suspect it's to do with the top point, that R's become a bit boring for people and they're looking for different things to do. So in summary, R's still not overtaken SAS by any means, and I'm not entirely sure I'd trust those numbers on that index, but it's really growing very fast. In the last few years, we've seen a massive acceptance. And, sorry, I meant to check whether there's anyone from GSK here before I insulted them. But we were told that GSK would never, ever use R. And today, they've got roughly, our estimation, 600-700 users across the world. So not the biggest deployment in the world by any means, but GSK IT have run through the validation of R. They get companies like us to help them, stroke them, support them through that process, because it is still scary. The other thing that's really happening is that there's a massive range of industries using it today. So the pictures I put up earlier, in 2002, none of those companies were really talking to us. So we're seeing a move away from pharmaceutical and finance. And R's becoming a standard. For better or for worse, R is something that you can actually suggest in a project meeting without fear of being told to go and stand outside. Any questions? Sorry for interrupting.